Jurassic World, Abomination. Written and created by Sherry Amori. Prologue. Before the screaming, there was silence. Not the comfortable silence of an empty room or a sleeping house. This was the silence of a predator that had just realized it no longer wanted to be contained. Deep beneath Isla Veritas, in a subterranean chamber carved from volcanic rock and reinforced with carbon steel 3 feet thick, something mutated and terrifying stirred. The storm brewing outside is the only thing that broke the silence before the screaming started. Chapter 1. The storm had been building all morning, rolling in from the black horizon like an uncoiled beast. By afternoon, it had found its voice. Thunder growled across the coastline, shaking the reinforced structure of Subterranean Lab 7A. Sheets of rain battered the jungle canopy above the concrete dome, spilling down vents and security shutters. Inside, the sterile air carried a faint chemical smell, ammonia, coffee, and old cigarette smoke that clung to the recycled oxygen filters. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, their pale glow reflecting off slick white tiles and polished stainless steel counters. Every few seconds, a flicker stuttered across the ceiling, casting the lab's occupants in pulses of ghostly blue-white light. Rows of monitors blinked in quiet rhythm, bathing the scientists in cold, digital illumination. A server rack emitted a low mechanical hum that blended with the steady thump of rain. Somewhere deep in the walls, the heavy pumps that maintained the cryogenic tanks let out a distant hydraulic sigh. Dr. Elkins adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, the reflection of the bioscan display dancing in his lenses. He was a narrow man, mid-50s, with thinning gray hair plastered to his temples from humidity. The dark circles beneath his eyes betrayed too many nights without sleep. He sipped at a mug of coffee gone lukewarm hours ago. The low hum of machinery filled Laboratory 7A with a dull vibration that seemed to settle into the bones. Fluorescent lights flickered above like dying fireflies, casting greenish reflections across metal counters and observation glass. Dr. Elkins leaned forward in his chair and nudged his glasses up the bridge of his nose. The biomonitor showed a steady, pulsing line, calm and unthreatening. He lifted a styrofoam cup to his lips again, wincing at the lukewarm taste. "The D-Rex vital signs are perfectly normal," he murmured. The tired rasp in his voice hinted at weeks of midnight shifts. "Should be a quiet night." Across from him, Dr. Mendez rolled her chair back and stretched. She was watching the containment feed with the expression of a woman who has accepted that her job is fundamentally insane and decided to make peace with it. She was somewhere in her early 40s, sharp-faced and quick-eyed, with the stillness of someone who had learned to manage fear by never letting it show. Her lab coat rustled like tired wings. She tapped idly at her keyboard, the screen lighting up her features in pale blue. You ever wonder if John Hammond would have signed off on something like this? Elkins let out a small laugh that held no warmth. Hammond didn't even want us weaponizing herbivores. If he saw this thing, he'd probably drop dead on the spot. A corner workstation glowed with data scrolls, illuminating Miles, the tech specialist. His face was smooth with youth, but drawn tight with anxiety. He stirred his coffee without drinking it. They're not in the theme park business anymore. InGen wants results and revenue. Hybrids like this fetch better numbers if they can rip a tank apart. Mendez's gaze drifted toward the observation wall. Beyond the reinforced glass, a vague shape lurked in thick shadows. It filled most of the containment chamber, a dense mass of scaled muscle and unknown anatomy. "This thing in the tank, it isn't a dinosaur," she whispered. "It's monster." Elkins nodded. The tension in his jaw is unmistakable. "They call it Distortus Rex for a reason." Miles huffed. "It gives me nightmares, and it hasn't even opened its eyes yet. God help us if it ever gets loose." A sharp electrical chirp cut through the lab. The steady beeping of the heart monitor quickened. Mendez leaned forward, her eyes narrowed. What the hell? Cortical activity spiked. Elkins was already moving, rolling his chair across the floor. Heart rate too. His voice had shifted, not panicked yet, but careful. It was stable 5 minutes ago. Did we adjust the feed cycle? Nothing in the log. Miles was already pulling up the real-time telemetry, his fingers moving fast. No changes. Feed cycle is nominal. Ambient temperature is nominal. Sedative levels should be... He stopped. His face went still in the way that faces go still when they are processing information the brain doesn't want to accept. Oh, hell. The room fell into a heavy silence. A deep, resonant vibration rolled through the lab. Dust drifted from the ceiling beams. Mendez stiffened. Did it just move? Elkins swallowed hard, his throat tightening. Dear God. The heart monitor accelerated into a frantic chirping. The containment chamber groaned, metal complaining under unseen pressure. It's metabolizing the sedative. Miles turned to look at them, and there was something in his eyes that had not been there a moment ago. Blood levels are burning through the dose. Whatever we gave it, it's rejecting it. Blood concentration is dropping like a stone. The second thud was louder. This one was not subtle. This one hit the walls. The overhead lights flickered just for a second, just enough to make the room lurch from blue-white to shadow and back again. And somewhere deep in the structure, the distant groan of steel under pressure traveled through every surface in the room like a whispered threat. Get someone from security on the line, Elkins said. Now! On it! Miles already had the radio in his hand. Mendez had backed away from her workstation. She was watching the blast door. This thing is supposed to be dormant for another 2 weeks. It shouldn't even be aware of its surroundings. Yeah. Miles's voice was very quiet now. Well, it's aware. The third thud was not a thud. It was an impact. The sound of something that weighed tons throwing itself against a barrier, not because it was afraid or panicking, but because it had decided the barrier needed to end. The emergency klaxon activated with a shriek of sound that hit every nerve in the human body at once. Red warning lights stuttered to life along the ceiling, painting the lab in alternating slashes of crimson and shadow. On Miles's screen, every vital sign for X122 spiked into the red simultaneously. Damn it, he growled. Security, hurry! Metal creaked. A long, tortured groan shivered through the chamber. Control, do you read? Miles had the radio pressed against his mouth. Lab 7A is compromised. The subject has breached containment. We need full lockdown, now! Static. He tried again. More static. His voice was very flat now. The flatness of a man who has accepted something terrible and is trying to think past it. They're not answering. I think we're cut off. The containment door began to bow. It was gradual at first, barely perceptible, a slight convexity in the center of 3 feet of titanium composite that would have been invisible to anyone not already staring at it, with the specific dread of someone waiting for exactly this. Elkins saw it.
He made a sound in the back of his throat that was not a word. Then, with the thunderous, screeching, metallic shriek of metal being bent by forces it was not designed to withstand, the door warped inward. Structural bolts the size of a man's fist sheared off and skittered across the floor like discarded coins. The containment door, the door designed to hold a full-grown Tyrannosaurus Rex, buckled. "Seal the room!" Mendez screamed. The emergency shutters engaged with a mechanical roar, dropping from the ceiling with the urgency of a system finally acknowledging what the humans in the room had known for the past 30 seconds. They got halfway down before a surge of sparks from the fried control panel froze them in place, half open, useless. Then the lights went out. Not gradually, not a flicker. Out. Completely. The emergency reserves, designed with triple redundancy, failed simultaneously, as though the facility's electrical system had simply decided it was done. In the absolute darkness, the only sound was the ragged breathing of 3 human beings trying very hard to be quiet. Then, something breathed back. It came from just beyond the containment door. A deep, wet exhalation that was too close, far too close, pressing against the air itself with a weight that seemed to make the darkness thicker. It was not the breath of something that was afraid. It was the breath of something that was tasting. "Shut up," Miles whispered. "Everyone shut up. Don't move. Don't breathe loud. Don't—" A sound. Deliberate, wet, unhurried. The rasping of massive nostrils drinking the air. Metal groaned softly somewhere to their left, not the blast door, but the wall beside it, compressing under weight that had no business being where it was. In the darkness, Elkins's voice came out as something barely above a breath. "We shouldn't have used that specimen. I said it from the beginning. I said the foreign genetic material was—"
"You spliced in something else?" Miles's voice was low and furious. "What was it? What else did you put in it?" Mendez, cornered against the far wall, her back pressed against a rack of specimen containers, answered in the precise, clipped tone of a woman who has spent her career hiding behind institutional language. "That's above your clearance level. That is proprietary—" "We're all dead anyways." Miles's whisper cracked at the edges, raw with terror and fury. "And you're worried about my clearance level? What did you put in it?" The outer bulkhead exploded inward. There was no other word for it. The composite door did not buckle or crack. It simply ceased to be a barrier, the structural integrity failing all at once, as though it had been nothing more than suggestion. The noise of it was physical, a pressure wave that shoved the air from everyone's lungs, that sent the fire extinguisher on the wall rattling against its mount, that drowned out every other sound in the universe for 2 full seconds. In that darkness, lit only by the distant, sparking remains of shorting electrical systems, and the faint red pulse of a single emergency beacon somewhere above them, the Distortus Rex entered Lab 7A. They heard it before they saw it. Footsteps that were not footsteps but seismic events, each placement of weight against the floor, traveling up through the soles of their boots and into their spines. A smell preceded it, hot and metallic and organic, the smell of a massive predator's exhalation, carrying with it something chemical and wrong, something that made the back of the throat burn. Miles's voice cut through the chaos. "Hide! Get underneath the desks! Move!" Tables overturned. Monitors crashed to the floor in explosions of glass and sparks. He ran, footsteps fast and desperate, and was intercepted. The sound of the interception lasted only a second, but it was a second that would never entirely leave the memories of anyone who heard it. A sudden, horrible organic snap, followed by wet impacts, followed by silence. Dr. Elkins was sobbing. "No, no, no, Miles!" Mendez, somewhere in the dark, was praying, her voice barely above a murmur. "Please don't see me. Please don't see me. Please don't." The creature paused. In the silence, Elkins heard it. The slow, satisfied crunch of bone. The deep, resonant purr of something enormous at the apex of its existence, entirely comfortable in the dark, tasting the room and finding it satisfactory. Dr. Elkins took one final, shuddering breath. It caught in his throat. Then something moved in the dark with terrible speed. Then there was nothing. Only the darkness and the wet sound of the thing feeding. The lights tried one final time, flickered once, twice, a dying pulse, and went black. Silence followed. Chilling, absolute silence. Chapter 2. Rain hammered the steel roof of the Biosyngenetics Special Operations Command bunker with relentless force. Every drop rang like a distant drum, merging with the low hum of aging fluorescent bulbs. Water slid down the concrete walls outside, seeping cold into the bones of the building. Inside, the air smelled of wet stone, weapon lubricant, and the faint sting of ozone from overloaded power conduits. Tactical boots marched through the narrow corridor in a crisp, disciplined rhythm. Operators filed into the war room in single formation. Their movements were efficient and purposeful, their expressions cold in the glow of flickering lights. This was a place built for decisions that carved themselves into the people who made them. Holographic displays crackled to life along the walls. Blue and red waves rolled across tactical screens, sending sharp reflections across armored vests and grim faces. The main table projected a three-dimensional map of Isla Veritas. It hovered like a ghost above the polished metal surface, an isolated scar of jungled terrain floating in a shifting sea. Red blips pulsed over the island's northern quadrant like infected wounds. Commander Tyler Rourke stood at the front of the briefing room and did not appear to mind the rain. He was 48 years old, Native American, and built like a man who had spent 3 decades methodically removing every soft edge from himself. His face was sharp-planed and weathered, the face of a man who had given orders in places that no map acknowledged, and accepted the consequences of those orders with the composure of someone who had long since made his peace with difficult arithmetic. He spoke without preamble, without theater, and without any effort to soften what he was saying. When he spoke, his voice cut through the storm like a serrated blade. "Let's keep this short." His voice carried the authority of someone who has never needed to raise it. At 1500 hours, InGen's research center on Isla Veritas experienced a containment breach. Biosyngenetics has tasked us with recovery, specifically the retrieval of facility data from the primary server core. He let that sit for a moment. As of now, the facility is showing no telemetry, no life signs, no satellite relays, nothing. The island has gone dark. On the display behind him, a thermal map of Isla Veritas pulsed with red blips, scattered, irregular, moving in patterns that suggested things large enough to register on satellite imaging. The last confirmed audio transmission came from Lab 7A at approximately 2200 hours, the night of the breach. We believe that transmission involved Subject X122. Rourke paused. Nicknamed the Distortus Rex. From the second row, Private Mason muttered, Yeah, because giving nightmares a name makes it better. No one laughed. Lieutenant Vega, stern and unshaken, leaned forward with both hands braced on the table. Her dark eyes locked onto every shifting contour of the map. What is the operation, Commander? 3 objectives, Rourke continued. 1. Locate and secure the primary data core. 2. Sanitize the servers after retrieval. 3. Come home. Questions? Operators began their gear checks. Velcro tore. Rifle bolts clicked and clacked. Magazines snapped into place. Combat knives were unsheathed and inspected. The metallic orchestra of soldiers preparing for hell echoed off the bunker's walls. Sergeant Hale, 24 years old, blonde, with the confidence of a young man who has never yet been wrong in a way that cost him anything serious, leaned back in his chair with a smile that managed to be simultaneously enthusiastic and condescending. He smirked like someone who mistook terror for a good time. We are finally hunting dinosaurs. Private Quinn, seated beside him, looked significantly less enthusiastic. I thought most were extinct. Most are, Rourke answered. But InGen discovered that certain equatorial climates can still sustain them. They are financially desperate. They resorted to creating newer, more dangerous predators to sell to the highest bidder. That is the environment you are walking into. Hale's smile widened. You're leaving out the best part, Commander. Word is, they've been splicing these things' DNA with other species. Not just bigger, meaner. Meaner than the Indominus Rex. Meaner than the Spinosaurus. He looked around the room, clearly enjoying the discomfort his words were producing. We're not hunting dinosaurs. We're hunting atrocities. Private Briggs gave a low whistle. So, this is basically a live-action dino crisis. Hale nodded. Something like that. His voice held none of the humor his smirk suggested.
Commander Rourke raised his hand. The room fell still again. There is one additional element to this operation. We have a civilian specialist accompanying us, a biosyn genetics liaison, here to ensure that any data, samples, or high-level technology comes through proper channels. He paused. Give me a moment. In the corridor, the sliding door opened with a soft hiss. Lightning flickered through the hallway, momentarily illuminating the figure who just walked through the door. She was in her early 40s, but looked no older than 30. She was beautiful in the way that competence and confidence produced when they've had time to settle. Rich brown skin, sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that took in a room. Rainwater dripped from the hood of her jacket. She held a phone to her ear with one hand, her tone calm but edged with something raw. I told you before, I am not working for Biosyn out of spite of him. I know exactly what happened on Isla Sorna. Her voice dropped lower. It was 18 years ago, and it still haunts me. The work I do is about eliminating chaos. Commander Rourke walked over to the woman and cleared his throat. Dr. Malcolm, we are ready for you. Kelly Malcolm turned to Commander Rourke, gestured towards him with her index finger, and turned her attention back to the caller on her phone. Kelly sighed. Sarah, I promise we will talk about this in depth when I return from my business trip. She ended the call, turned, and walked through the door. The briefing room quieted when she entered. It always did. Kelly walked to the front without hurrying and looked at the room with the calm assessment of someone conducting a very rapid evaluation of assets and liabilities. She lowered her hood. Her gaze swept across the assembled soldiers with confidence that made Hale's smirk falter. This is Dr. Kelly Malcolm, Rourke continued. She is our liaison. Any samples, data modules, research notes, or advanced tech go through her first. Is that clear? There were muttered acknowledgments, a scoff, a quiet whisper that died as soon as Kelly looked in that direction. Hale studied her with the frank, slightly challenging appraisal of a man who has decided in advance that he won't be impressed. Hope she knows how to handle herself. Kelly did not look at him when she answered. Hope you know how to stay in your lanes, Sergeant. A ripple of tension spread across the room. Even the storm outside seemed to pause. But somewhere in the room, someone, Quinn it sounded like, let out a breath that was trying very hard not to be a laugh. Commander Rourke closed his folder and finally smiled. We leave in 30. Pack for rain, teeth, and fire.
Chapter 3. The transport helicopter tore through the storm, its rotor blades cutting the saturated air with a deep mechanical chop that thudded through the cabin walls. Turbulence rattled the metal floor beneath the soldiers' boots. The tang of oil, wet canvas, and burned electrical residue from the comm system filled the confined interior. It was not a comfortable flight. The aircraft, a military transport with aging hydraulics and a pilot named Hawk. Inside, the team sat in two facing rows and thought their own thoughts in the noisy dark. Private Vega tightened the straps on her gear for the third time. She was 30 years old, Italian, with close-cropped dark hair. You're serious, she said to no one, addressing the general situation rather than any individual within it. A night drop into a dinosaur zone. Whose genius idea was this? Mason, seated across from her, adjusted his night vision rig with the practiced ease of a man who has learned to occupy his hands when his mind is doing things he'd rather it didn't. Hope your night vision is better than your nerves. Keep talking, Mason, Vega shot back. We will see who screams first. Hale, occupying the position nearest the door with the comfortable authority of a man who has claimed territory by existing in it, turned his attention to Kelly with the expression of someone about to ask a question he already knows will be unfair. So, Dr. Malcolm, he made the title sound like a question. You ever actually been in a hot zone with dinosaurs? Or do you just write about them from a lab somewhere? Kelly, who had been watching the lightning through the rain-streaked window, answered without looking at him. Isla Sorna. I was 13. She paused. I watched 2 adult Tyrannosaurus Rex flip a trailer with my father inside it, because his girlfriend took their infant to treat its broken leg. She finally looked at Hale. I'm not that kind of doctor. I'm the kind with field experience. Several heads turned. One soldier whistled under his breath. Damn, Mason muttered. Is that true? Kelly finally looked at him. You want trauma details, or are we trading survival stories? Lieutenant Vega adjusted her grip on the overhead strap. Her tone softened. She is legit. Her father is that chaos theory expert, Dr. Ian Malcolm. Quinn, looking out at the dark water below, said, I thought that guy was half crazy. Briggs snorted. Aren't we all? Look where we are headed. The rain intensified, drumming so hard against the windshield that it sounded like gravel striking glass. For a moment, only thunder and the relentless churn of the rotor blades filled the cabin. After a while, Hale tried again. It was his nature to try again. So, what exactly is this thing that got loose? District Rex? Like a knockoff T-Rex? D-Rex, Kelly said. Easier to say. And no, not a knockoff of anything. She turned from the window,
and her voice took on the careful, precise quality of someone translating technical reality into language that non-specialists can absorb. Larger frame than a standard Tyrannosaurus. Quad limb mutation. The front limbs are massive, capable of grasping and crushing. Neural growth in the prefrontal cortex, which a standard T-Rex doesn't have much of. Problem-solving behavior. Adaptive intelligence. Hale's smile didn't waver. So, it's big and smart. What's the worst it can do? Kelly looked at him with an expression that was not unkind, but was entirely without illusion. The mutations I'm describing aren't cosmetic, Sergeant. They are the result of introducing foreign genetic material into a Tyrannosaurus. The creature that resulted from that process is not a dinosaur. It's something that has never existed before in the history of life on this planet. And it has been loose on that island for almost 24 hours. The worst it can do is everything. A burst of static crackled from the cockpit. The helicopter dropped several feet through a pocket of turbulence. The cabin lurched. Equipment rattled against restraints. From the cockpit, Hawk's voice came over the intercom. "Eyes up! We've got visuals!" The helicopter slowed as it dipped through a curtain of rain. Beyond the storm, Isla Veritas emerged from the shadows. Dense jungle canopy writhed beneath the wind. Lightning crawled across the ridges like veins of orange fire. Hale looked at the burning facility, and his smile slowly faded for the first time. "Showtime," he said. His voice was different now.
Chapter 4. The transport helicopter cut through the storm like a wounded predator, rotor blades hammering the air with relentless force. Rain slapped against the windscreen in violent, uneven bursts. Rivulets snaked down the glass in twisting lines as lightning illuminated the cockpit in harsh white flashes. Static hissed from the comms, crackling through the cabin like angry whispers. Commander Rourke stepped forward, his silhouette cutting across the dim interior. "Take us over the InGen Research Center. I want eyes on whatever waits for us down there." From the air, what was left of the InGen Research Center looked like something had eaten it. Not consumed by fire, though fire had clearly played a role. Several sections of the main structure still burned with the low, determined flames of materials that would be weeks dying. Not destroyed by storm, though the island's weather had certainly compounded the damage. The facility had been simply unmade. The carbon steel walls, visible even from altitude as gleaming barriers now bent and peeled back like the lid of a sardine tin, had been deformed by impacts that defied easy categorization. Sections of the compound that should have been underground were exposed, their roofs having been removed from the inside. Entire corridors were visible as open channels, the ceilings gone, the walls caved in, the contents scattered across the jungle floor in a debris field that extended 200 meters in every direction. Something, or some things, had walked through that facility the way a person walks through tall grass. Lieutenant Vega pressed against the window. Holy hell. Private Quinn leaned to see. His voice trembled. There is still smoke and flames. Parts of the labs are still burning. Hold position, Rourke said, leaning forward to press his face against the rain-streaked glass. The helicopter banked in a slow circle, giving them a better angle. Those walls were reinforced by carbon steel, Hale said. He had his binoculars pressed against his eyes, and his voice had taken on the flat, factual tone of someone reading a damage report they wish they weren't reading. 3-inch composite. I've seen IED blasts that didn't do that. That was the D-Rex, Kelly said. One dinosaur? One dinosaur. The helicopter circled in silence for a moment, and everyone looked at the ruin below and did their own private accounting of what that meant for their chances. "Anyone think they're still alive in there?" Briggs asked. "No," said Kelly. "We still need confirmation," Rourke said. A sudden screech tore through the sky. It was deep, unnatural, and so loud that the hull vibrated. Briggs saw them first. "Is it me?" he said, his voice going very careful and very still. "Or does anyone else see a bunch of glowing colors coming straight at us?" They were visible at the edge of the searchlight beam, shapes in the dark, moving against the cloud, wrong in a way that took the brain a moment to fully process. Not the familiar silhouettes of Pteranodon or any pterosaur in the fossil record. These were larger, more angular, their wingspans wicked, their movements too fast and too precise, and they glowed. Not brightly, it was subtle, the kind of bioluminescence that exists in deep-sea creatures and appears in shallow light only when you're close enough for it to matter. Streaks of blue-green along the wing membranes, pulses of pale amber at the wingtips. Beautiful, in the way that certain venomous things are beautiful. A blurred mass streaked past the helicopter, so fast that the wind pressure knocked the aircraft sideways. Gear rattled. Several soldiers cursed. The helicopter tilted 45 degrees in a single, violent motion as something enormous struck the fuselage at roughly 90 miles per hour, the impact ringing through every surface of the aircraft like a bell struck by a hammer. Equipment broke free of restraints. Someone's rifle swung on its strap and caught Quinn across the jaw hard enough to draw blood. The engine note shifted. Suddenly illegal, laboring, the pitch of a machine that has been fundamentally changed. "What was that?" Rourke barked. "Night vision, now." Kelly pressed her face against the glass and grabbed a pair of binoculars as another street flashed by. "Those aren't normal pterosaurs. Look at their skin, glowing patches, bioluminescent streaks. Those are lab mutations. The scientist called them sky fangs." "How many?" Rourke demanded. 6, maybe 8, approaching from... Another shape struck the underside of the helicopter. The hull screeched. Quinn smashed against the window as he steadied himself. "It is huge. And fast. Too fast." The helicopter jerked again. Something scraped along the belly plating. "We got incoming!" Vegas shouted. Through the window, visible now in the searchlight, one of the creatures swept past in a tight banking turn. Its wingspan was 12 feet, maybe more. Its beak was elongated beyond pteranodon proportions, the mandibles hooked and serrated. Its eyes caught the light and reflected it, flat and silver and without any quality that even reminded Kelly of the pterosaurs she had studied. One wing trailed fluid. It had come through the rotor arc and been partially shredded, but it was still flying, still banking, still turning toward them. "Weapons up," Rourke commanded. "Light it up if it comes back." The storm churned around them. Rain whipped into mist by the churning blades. The second one hit the rotors. It came from above, directly above, folding its wings and dropping in a vertical dive that made it impossible to track until the moment it struck, at which point tracking became academic. The rotor blades intersected it at 1,100 revolutions per minute. The sound of bone meeting aviation steel at rotational speed was something none of them would ever forget. A rapid series of wet, percussive impacts, each one accompanied by a mist of dark fluid that spattered the windows. The creature shrieked in agony, a sound that somehow contained both reptilian snarl and something deeper and stranger, a resonance that vibrated in the chest cavity. The blades tore through its body,
sending chunks of flesh and bone across the stormy sky. Its dying scream gurgled into silence. And then the rotor was gone. "Rotor's gone!" Hawk was screaming from the cockpit. "We are going down! Hang on to something!" The world became a rotating chaos of rain and darkness, and the sickening, stomach-dropping sensation of controlled flight becoming uncontrolled fall. The fuselage spun. G-forces pressed them against their restraints. The island below, burning, dark, waiting, rose up through the rain at a speed that made the concept of survival seem optimistic. Rourke's voice cut through the chaos with the authority of a man who has decided to be calm because there is no other option. "Hang on to something!" The helicopter hit the tree canopy at roughly 40 miles per hour. The trees, old-growth jungle, massive, trunked, and dense, absorbed some of it. Not enough. The fuselage buckled. Windows shattered, and the tail section separated. The instrument panel exploded in a cascade of sparks and shrapnel. Something struck Kelly on the temple hard enough to white out her vision. Then silence.
Chapter 5. Rain fell through the broken canopy in thin, cold streams. The wreckage of the helicopter smoked in several places, the electrical fires burning with the sick, chemical smell of burning insulation and aviation fuel. In the trees above, a section of rotor blade was lodged between two massive branches, swinging slightly in the updraft, catching occasional light from the burning wreckage below. Kelly came to herself, lying on her side in wet leaves, staring at the underside of a fern frond, with no immediate knowledge of how she had arrived there. The process of reassembly was slow. Awareness of the rain on her neck, then the ache in her left shoulder, then the sound of something burning, then the complete and fully formed understanding of where she was and what had happened, and what was, with considerable probability, coming next. She sat up. The world tilted, steadied. Her head was bleeding, not badly, a scalp cut, the kind that produces alarming quantities of blood from minor damage, and she pressed her sleeve against it and looked at what was left of the helicopter. Not much. "Sound off!" Rourke's voice came from somewhere to her right, already organizing, already making the chaos into something manageable. He sounded winded but functional, which she catalogued as good news. "Hale, Vega, Mason." "Present. It's dark as hell out here," Mason's voice, tighter than usual. "Here," Hale, somewhere in the brush. "Ribs feel cracked, but I'm moving." "My wrist," Vega's voice came from near the fuselage, and the quality of it, the compressed, controlled quality of someone managing significant pain, told Kelly the nature of the injury before Vega said it. "Broken. It's twisted bad. I can't." "Where's Briggs?" That was Quinn. "Here," from the tree line. "I'm here." "The pilot?" Rourke asked. Silence. They found what was left of the pilot. He had been thrown through the windshield on impact. The restraining system had failed, or he had not been properly secured, or the forces involved had simply exceeded the engineering tolerances of both systems simultaneously. He had traveled approximately 12 feet from the cockpit before the jungle stopped him. He was face up in the wet undergrowth, and the first wrong thing was the angle of his back. Not bent exactly, but arranged in a configuration that the human spine does not achieve voluntarily. A curve that went the wrong direction, with the specific definitiveness of something that has been permanently altered rather than temporarily displaced. Half his face was gone. Not injured, not burned. Gone. As though the surface had been removed with industrial care, leaving the underlying structure partially exposed. The flesh that remained at the edges of the wound was not burned or torn,
but smoothed, as though it had been dissolved rather than damaged. He got thrown through the windshield, Mason said, his voice doing the specific thing voices do when they were being forced to be clinical about something deeply unclinical. His back's twisted, broken in multiple places. Half his face is gone, like it burned off, or, he paused, melted. Quinn had moved to the lower body. His voice was quieter now and tighter. His leg, look at the femur, clean through the bone. The edges are smooth. Something bit through it. Not from the crash, Kelly said. She had come up behind them and was looking at Hawk with the focused, compartmented attention of a scientist. That damage happened after he was already on the ground. Something was here already? Briggs looked at the jungle around them with a new quality of attention. Before we even keep it together, Rourke said. Everyone, secure the perimeter, now. We made a lot of noise and it carries. Kelly, help with Vega's wrist. Kelly set Vega's wrist by the light of a failing flashlight. It was not a kind process. Kelly worked quickly because speed is a mercy in these situations, announcing the 3 count and then not completing it, setting the bone at 2 because hesitation helps no one. Vega's scream split the jungle quiet with an honesty that nothing else about the situation possessed, traveling up through the canopy and into the rain-soaked dark above. Done, Kelly said. It's stable. It'll hold. Vega was breathing through her nose, jaw clamped, not quite crying. Confirmed, she managed. I hate this island. Everyone hates this island, Kelly said. That's appropriate.
They heard the copies before they saw them. A sound like dry leaves moving, except there was no wind. A rapid, light scratching, the sound of small bodies moving through underbrush with the purposeful efficiency of animals going toward something that interests them. They were feeding on Hawk. A dozen of them, maybe more. Compsognathus, the small bipedal dinosaurs that look, at a brief glance, like large lizards, and behave, at any length of observation, like nothing so comforting. They scattered at Mason's approach, hissing and skittering with the indignant energy of animals interrupted at a meal, one of them squealing as his boot made contact. They look like regular dinosaurs, Briggs said, watching them retreat into the undergrowth with expressions of offended calculation. Not everything on this island is mutated, Kelly said. Some species migrated here over time. The compies, the smaller herbivores, they survived naturally. But the glowing pterosaurs? The lab's signature is all over those. Rourke had been consulting his compass and looking at the tree line. We need high ground and a communication point. We're east of the original landing zone. Quinn, take point. Hale, rear guard. We move quiet, low, and tight. How do we get out of here? Vega asked. With Hawk gone, there's no one to fly us out. Biosyn will know there's a problem when the pilot doesn't check in, Kelly said. They'll send a recovery team. You sure? Kelly paused for half a second, the pause of honest uncertainty rather than fabricated confidence. Positive, Hale. But if you're scared, you can hold my flashlight. A few of them almost laughed. Almost. They moved into the jungle, and the jungle closed behind them like a wall. Chapter 6. The climb was brutal. The ridge path, if it deserved the name, which was debatable, was a series of wet, root-tangled inclines with the specific cruelty of terrain that is steep enough to be exhausting, but not steep enough to be interesting. The rain had turned everything into a contest between mud and determination. 3 times someone slipped and was caught by someone else. The jungle pressed in from both sides, and in the dark, with the night vision rigs turning the world into flat green approximations of depth, Every shadow was negotiable. Quinn froze mid-step. "You hear that?" Kelly tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "Raptor chatter. A pack. Faint, maybe a mile out." In the silence, they heard it. Not the simple vocalizations of the raptors Kelly remembered from Isla Sorna, those clicking, resonant communications that had unnerved her father's team 20 years ago. These were faster, more complex, the clicks and chirps layered over each other with the density of a language being spoken at speed. And they were patterned. She was almost certain they were patterned. Briggs stiffened. "I thought they were all gone. You were telling me there's a pack still here?" "More than a pack. This island has a full raptor population, naturalized, not lab-made. Standard velociraptor with whatever adaptations years of island isolation have produced." She paused, listening to the sound in the dark. "They know we're here." Mason shook his flickering flashlight. "Just what I needed to hear in the pitch black." From the ridge, they could see the research facility, or what had been the research facility. In the dark, with emergency beacons still pulsing red in the ruins, the compound looked like the aftermath of something geological, a collapse, a volcanic event, something driven by forces that didn't negotiate. Fires burned in 3 separate sections. The main building's roof was partially gone. The perimeter wall, visible even from a kilometer away as a pale scar through the jungle, was broken in several places, with the specific directional deformation that comes from something pushing through it from the inside. "Half a kilometer out," Mason said. "I can see the smoke, and flames still burning." Vega said, "I don't see any movement down there." "There won't be," Kelly said. Briggs stared ahead. "Looks like hell from here." Whoosh! Wind and rain suddenly whipped violently as something massive dove past them. "Contact! Get down!" Hale shouted. The pterosaur hit Vega from above. There was no warning adequate for what happened. The first indication was a displacement of air, a downward pressure that preceded the impact by perhaps 0.2 of a second. Not long enough to react, only long enough to know something was coming. The creature folded its wings at the last moment, dropping the final 30 feet at terminal velocity with the efficiency of a predator that has made this calculation before, talons extended and locked. Vega's scream was immediate, involuntary, and short. The talons, curved, multi-pointed, each 2 feet long, punched through her body armor at the shoulders and chest with the casual authority of tools designed for exactly this purpose. The creature's momentum carried them both upward in a single, violent arc, Vega's body swinging below as the wings, bioluminescent patches blazing with sudden intensity, beat the air with tremendous power. "No! No! Help!" Vega was screaming, her voice moving away from them, upward, receding. "My God," Kelly breathed. Gunfire erupted. Hail opened up on the creature overhead, muzzle flashes strobing the storm. "Cease fire!" Rourke grabbed his arm. "You'll draw everything on this island to our position." "I had a shot," Hale roared back. The 2 men collided, boots sliding on slick rock. Then, sounds from above, flesh tearing, bones giving way under pressures they were not designed to withstand. The wet percussion of a large animal feeding at altitude. These sounds continued and did not stop, and were not the kind of sounds that anyone in range would ever entirely unhear.
Then it rained blood. Dark drops on pale stone, a crimson mist carried by the wind. When Mason looked up, there was nothing against the sky but clouds and lightning and the fading bioluminescence of creatures moving away. "Jesus," he said. "They tore her apart." The 2 soldiers are still fighting for control. "Enough!" Briggs shoved between them. "Not the time!" Quinn snapped. Rourke's voice turned lethal. "Disobey me again, and I will leave you for what is flying above us. Now the entire island knows we are here." From the jungle below came rapid clicking noises, followed by low, predatory growls. Raptor calls. Closer. Kelly steadied her weapon. "That is not distant anymore. All the noise drew them in." Rourke snapped back into command mode. "Gear check. Safety off. We move northeast. Dr. Malcolm, once we reach the facility, you contact Biosyn. Let them know we are alive and trapped in this nightmare." Without another word, the team slipped off the ridge, swallowed once again by the darkness of the now restless jungle. Chapter 7. The jungle closed in around them, its night song growing sharper and more urgent. The rain subsided, and moonlight lit the jungle. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle a warning carried on the heavy tropical air. Somewhere ahead, the rushing murmur of water whispered through the dense foliage. Briggs tilted his head. "You hear that? Sounds like a stream up ahead." They pushed through a wall of wet leaves, the foliage brushing their shoulders with cold, dripping fingers, and stepped into a clearing washed in pale moonlight. A wide stream cut through the jungle, its surface rippling over smooth stones. Mist clung low to the water, glowing faintly in the moon's reflection. "Water," Mason said, with a sigh of relief. Quinn stepped toward the bank. "Cover me. I need to take a leak." Before anyone could respond, a deep grunt echoed from the darkness, followed by heavy, rhythmic footsteps that shook droplets from the leaves. Kelly stiffened. "That is not a Rex. It's something else." The team advanced, weapons raised. The brush thinned. Massive shapes emerged in the moonlight. Kelly whispered, "Triceratops, Ankylosaurus, Stegosaurus, Parasaurolophus. We found the watering hole." Briggs squinted. "What is on its forehead?" The Triceratops lifted its head, and the moon revealed the answer. Barbs, sharp, spear-like growths of hardened bone that protrude like natural daggers. Bone barbs jutted from its frill in jagged, uneven rows, each one long, razor-edged, and curved like a hooked talon. They caught the moonlight with a dull, lethal shimmer, giving the creature a crown not of beauty, but of weapons waiting to impale anything that came too close. Kelly swallowed. "The trike's frill is covered in bone barbs. The stego's tail also shows mutation. There are two of them, spiked in opposite directions." Rourke's tone hardened. "Natural?" "No," Kelly replied. "Mutations. Lab-induced. Defensive traits that should not exist." Rain pattered softly as the massive herbivores drank, their movements slow but powerful. "They look like walking tanks," Mason whispered. "They are," Kelly said. "And if they get spooked, they will run us over without hesitation." Before they could move back, Quinn called out, away from the bank. Guys? You should see this." They hurried over. His flashlight beam landed on a colossal footprint. The print was filled with rainwater, a pool of it, dark and deep, the edges crisp in the soft mud. It was shaped like a T-Rex footprint. It was not a T-Rex footprint. The stride length alone suggested something heavier, something whose every step displaced more earth, something whose relationship to Tyrannosaurus Rex was the relationship that a nightmare has to a memory.
Quinn found the footprint while he was away from the group and answering nature's call. Briggs lowered his voice. "That is a T-Rex print." Kelly knelt at the edge and did not touch it. She measured it with her eyes, calculating stride depth and pressure distribution with the professional focus of someone who has spent her career making inferences from physical evidence. When she stood, her face was composed in the specific way that faces become composed when composure is necessary. "That was the D-Rex," she said. In the distance, as though the island had been listening and had chosen this moment to confirm, a sound traveled through the jungle that was not quite a roar. It was lower than that, more resonant, carrying harmonics that standard T-Rex vocalization didn't possess, frequencies that vibrated in the chest and stomach simultaneously, and produced, without clear neurological justification, a response that was less fear than the physiological precursor to fear. The anticipatory horror that the body generates when it recognizes that something has arrived that it has no category for. Birds. Dozens of them, invisible in the canopy, launched simultaneously, their departure making more noise than the call that triggered it. "Let's keep moving," Rourke said. They pushed forward, emerging into another clearing.
Tall grass stretched before them 20 minutes later, swaying ominously in the wind like an ocean of green blades. It stretched from the edge of the tree line to the facility perimeter, roughly 400 meters of grass that stood 7 feet high, dense and close planted, the seed heads brushing the bottom of the cloud cover. In daylight, it would have been a field. In the dark, with the night vision rigs rendering it in flat green, it was a wall of moving shadows, each blade of grass a potential obstruction, each shift in the wind an event that needed to be assessed before it could be classified as nothing. "That is a straight shot to the lab," Hale said. He was looking at the facility lights visible above the grass on the very far side. "Cuts 2 hours off the approach. We go through, we're there in 20 minutes. "We don't go through," Kelly said. Hale turned to look at her. "It's grass." Rourke turned. "Why?" "It's a kill zone." Her voice was not raised, not theatrical. It had the flat certainty of someone describing physical law. "I have been in grass like this before. I watched 4 trained hunters, experienced men with weapons, enter a field like this on an island like this. I watched it from the other side. I never saw them again. What I heard," she stopped. "We go around." Hale scoffed. "We've already lost Vega," Quinn said. His voice had the quality of a man building a case. "Every hour out here is another chance to lose someone else. The direct route gets us to the objective faster. Faster gets us to extraction faster." "And what about the raptors we've been hearing for the last 3 hours?" Kelly asked. "They haven't attacked yet, because we haven't given them the right conditions. Long grass at night is the right condition. We would be moving blind and slow, and they would be moving fast and invisible. That's not a fight, that's a feeding." Rourke did not hesitate. "We'll find another route. With all due respect, Commander, who's running this operation?" Hale was looking at Rourke now. "Her or us?" "Stand down, Sergeant," Rourke said. "I say we push through," Hale insisted. Kelly shot Hale a cold look. "You go in there, and incompetence will get you killed." Quinn stepped up beside Hale. "We need to get to the lab. He is right." "Fine," Kelly said, "but do not expect us to come running when the screaming starts." "I'm going with Dr. Malcolm," Briggs said. He said it simply, without drama, in the tone of a man who has made a decision based on evidence. "She has survived this kind of thing before. That counts." Mason crossed his arms. We're special ops. We cross the grass, we get to the lab, we get out. I'm with Hale. Briggs turned away. Good luck, boys. Rourke joined him. Dr. Malcolm is our best chance of surviving on this island. Suit yourselves, Hale muttered. We will be at the lab before dawn. The teams split. Hale, Quinn, and Mason disappeared into the whispering grass, swallowed by its shifting blades. Kelly, Rourke, and Briggs moved along the tree line, every breath heavy with anticipation. Behind them, the night fell still, a silence that felt like something holding its breath, watching.
Chapter 8. The jungle fell silent as Hale, Mason, and Quinn stepped into the tall grass. Even the insects seemed to hesitate, their chirps sharp and uneven, as though warning of something unseen. The grass was waist-high, thick and wild, swaying like restless serpents under the humid breath of the night. This was the problem with tall grass at night, and it was a problem that seemed obvious in retrospect, but that the mind resisted acknowledging in prospect. Inside it, there was no distance, no horizon, no depth of field beyond the immediately adjacent stems. The flashlight created a bubble of visibility perhaps 3 feet in diameter, which sounds like enough, until the realization arrives that 3 feet is much less than the distance a large predator can cover in a single movement. "Damn, this grass is thick," Quinn whispered. "I can barely see anything." Mason exhaled shakily. "Maybe we should have gone with the others." "Quit whining," Hale growled. "Stick close. Stay quiet. We will be across in no time." The raptor chatter, which had been audible from the ridge trail as a distant sound, was now close enough that individual vocalizations could be distinguished. More of a conversation, complex, rapid, the calls interlocking with the specificity of animals coordinating rather than simply communicating. Quinn froze. "Did you hear that?" "It is nothing," Mason said quickly. "Probably a compy." "No talking," Hale ordered. "Weapons ready. Eyes open." 3 safeties clicked off in unison. The silence tightened around them like a noose. The grass moved to their left. Not wind movement. Directional, purposeful. The movement of a body displacing stems as it passed through them. "Hold," Hale whispered. "Don't move." Nothing. Then, from the right, also movement. Then, from directly ahead, a sound that was not quite vocalization and not quite breath. A low, wet exhalation that seemed to come from very close and from multiple directions simultaneously. "Hale," Quinn said. "Do not move," Hale murmured. Something lunged from Quinn's left side with a speed that bypassed conscious perception entirely, going straight to the animal response layer of the brain. Mason's reaction was a scream that was cut off by the impact of the strike. Not the creature hitting him, but something that had been moving through the grass on his right side for the past 30 seconds, patient and precise. The velociraptor hit him in the side with both killing claws extended. The sickle-shaped talon on each foot, the functional killing implement that the species has evolved and refined over 65 million years of competitive survival, raked upward in the motion it was designed for. Mason's scream was not long. "Mason!" Quinn fired blindly into the grass. 3 rounds. 4. The muzzle flash illuminating nothing useful, the shots going into vegetation. He spun, and the second raptor, that had been approaching from his rear before they entered the grass, hit him in the chest and bore him backward and down into the wet ground
with a force that drove all air from his lungs simultaneously. Hale emptied his magazine into the dark. He hit something, heard it screech, heard it fall, heard the thrashing of something large and damaged in the grass. He hit the magazine release and reloaded with shaking hands, and fired again. And in the flashes of the muzzle, he saw, briefly, two shapes. Raptor-shaped, fast, one retreating and one still. Then the grass was still. Heavy breathing. His own. "Quinn," he said. "Mason." Nothing. He stood in the silence of the grass and breathed and understood with the specific, stomach-dropping clarity of revelation that he was alone. That the people who had followed him in here were not going to answer him. That Kelly Malcolm had told them what would happen, and he had chosen not to listen. And now he was standing in it. "God damn it," he whispered. "God damn it. Should have listened. Should have." Behind him, in the dark, something moved. Hale ran. On the jungle route, the rest of the team froze as distant gunfire cracked through the night. Human screams followed. The reports traveled clearly through the wet air. 3 bursts, separated by the characteristic pause of magazine changes. Then a final burst. Then silence. In the silence, a sound that was not a scream exactly, but that was certainly made by a human being and was certainly not voluntary. Then nothing. "Jesus Christ," Rourke said, very quietly. Briggs was looking toward the grass field. "They didn't stand a chance out there, did they?" "No," Kelly said. "We gave them a choice," Rourke said. "Now we keep moving." They moved. The jungle closed around them. The sounds from the grass field, the rustling, the rhythmic sounds of large animals feeding, faded behind them.
Chapter 9. The jungle closed in around them, branches scraping their shoulders and wet leaves slapping cold against their faces. Each step crunched over damp earth and decaying foliage, releasing the heavy scent of rot into the thick, humid air. Thunder rumbled far above, rolling like a warning drumbeat through the canopy. The storm was gathering again. Then the light, emergency beacons pulsing red at irregular intervals, creating a rhythm that felt intentionally disorienting, the light quality of a place that is functioning partially and malevolently, that has kept just enough power to look occupied. Then the perimeter fence, or what was left of it. The fence, reinforced steel mesh, electrified, 12 feet high, had been breached in 3 locations. Not cut, not blown, breached. The mesh had been parted from the inside with the casual authority of something that had encountered the fence and decided it was not a meaningful obstacle. Where the breach was cleanest, the steel mesh had been folded back with nearly geometric precision, as though the act of moving through it had been unhurried. Briggs slowed, panting lightly. "I'm getting visuals. Red light up ahead." Kelly pushed a curtain of vines aside, squinting through the darkness. A faint, pulsing glow flickered in the distance. "That is the emergency beacon," she said. "The lab's perimeter system must still be partially operational." Rourke stepped beside her, rain dripping from his gear. His voice was low and coarse. "We're getting closer." Fat raindrops began to fall, tapping against leaves before streaming down their gear. Beneath the patter of rain came another sound, faint but unmistakable, the electric buzz of high-voltage current crawling along steel mesh. Kelly lifted a hand. "Stay away from the fencing. If any of it is still powered, it will cook you where you stand." The ground trembled. The entire team froze. "Hold your fire," Rourke ordered quietly. "Do not give away our position." Briggs raised his thermal scope. His breathing hitched. "I have something. Big. Oh God. Several somethings." Through the thermal scope, Briggs could see them. 3 large heat signatures moving in loose formation along the inner perimeter wall, their body heat rendering them in orange and white against the cold blue of the damaged facility. A family group, 2 large adults, 1 juvenile, moving with the careful, slightly anxious energy of animals in unfamiliar territory that has recently become dangerous. Kelly whispered, dread creeping into her voice. That was a family of tyrannosaurs. Rourke did not falter. "Does not matter, we are still going in." Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating the tree line for a single white flash. The hulking shapes beyond the fence moved with eerie grace, tails slicing through the rain as they prowled the perimeter. From deeper inside the compound came a shrill, inhuman screech, one that did not belong to any tyrannosaur. Briggs swallowed hard. "What the hell was that?" Kelly shook her head. "Not sure, but that was not a Rex." The perimeter door loomed ahead, blood streaking the hinges like rust. When Rourke pushed it open, it groaned loudly, metal scraping against metal in a pained shriek. Rain ran off their heads and dripped into shallow puddles beneath their boots as they entered the facility. Inside the compound, the corridor stretched before them like the throat of something dead. The walls, once white composite paneling, were buckled and warped inward. The surface split open in long vertical fractures where something had been applied from the outside with no concern for what lay within. Emergency lighting ran the length of the ceiling in a thin red strip, most of the bulbs shattered, the ones still functioning, pulsing with the weak, irregular rhythm of a dying heartbeat. Cables hung in loose tangles from the exposed ceiling where panels had been ripped away, their severed ends sparking faintly in the damp air. The floor was a ruin of overturned equipment, shattered tablet screens, a toppled 1.5 rack from the medical bay, a fire extinguisher that had discharged completely and left a pale chemical frost across a 30-foot stretch of tile that was otherwise dark with old blood. Doors along the corridor had been torn from their frames entirely, not blown, torn. The hinges pulled clean through the wall on both sides, leaving raw wounds in the concrete where the steel had been.
Deeper in, the facility revealed its full collapse. A support beam had come down across the main junction corridor, bending under a weight that structural engineering had not anticipated and would never account for. And beneath it lay the compressed wreckage of a security station. Monitors, a weapons locker, a chair still bolted to the floor that had simply been flattened by the beam's descent. Water ran in thin, steady ribbons from a ruptured pipe somewhere above, tracing dark channels between the debris and pooling in the low points of a floor that had shifted on its foundation. The smell was layered and specific. Coolant, copper, the chemical bite of halon fire suppressant, and underneath all of it, thick and inescapable, the organic heaviness of what happens when something large dies in an enclosed space and the ventilation system has been offline for 2 days. "There is a functioning security desk," Kelly noted, pointing to a bank of cracked monitors flickering weakly. The security desk still had power. Partial power. The monitors were flickering, the feeds cutting in and out, the recording systems running on backup batteries that were clearly past their design tolerances. But some cameras were still active, and on 3 separate screens, footage from the night of the breach was playing on loop, the facility's recording systems having captured and stored the event before the main power failed.
Rourke gestured sharply.
Briggs, cameras. If anything still works, find us the communications room and try to get eyes on what happened here.
Some screens still have power, Briggs said, stepping up to a flickering monitor. Static swirled. Then an image snapped into view. On one screen, a long corridor, empty. Then, at the far end, a door exploding inward. A shape filling the doorway, briefly visible, then gone, too fast for the camera. Then the corridor filling with running people and the sounds of running people, and then the sounds changing. On another, the lab itself, Lab 7A. The containment chamber door bowing, the scientists backing away, the door failing. In the moment before the camera was destroyed, something visible in the monitor. Not all of it, not enough to fully comprehend, moving through the space with a speed and a purposefulness that had no relationship to the hesitant, probing movement of a newly awakened animal. The third screen, static. Then, the camera in the parking structure, still functional. A vehicle, overturned. Beside it, incompletely visible, something that was very large, lying very still. Kelly's breath caught.
God. Stay focused,
Rourke said, though even his voice carried strain.
Kelly, server room. Where is it?
She pointed deeper into the compound.
Far side of the east wing, below ground. We will need to pass through biocontainment and take the main elevator. The communications room is adjacent.
Rourke looked at the blood trail on the hallway floor, a smear that began near the entrance and moved toward the east wing with the directional irregularity of something being dragged rather than something walking, and said,
Eyes up. Something got in here.
Or, Kelly said,
it never left.
Chapter 10.
Boots pressed through the damp hallway as they entered the biocontainment wing. The corridor leading into it was lined on both sides with containment pods, glass and steel cylinders the size of utility vehicles, each one designed to house a specimen under continuous observation. There had been 18 of them. Every single one was shattered. Not cracked, shattered. The glass reduced to fragments across the floor, the steel housings bent or split or simply gone, as though the contents of each pod had decided on departure simultaneously and with great enthusiasm. Steam hissed from ruptured environmental systems. Claw marks, deep, parallel, the width suggesting something with a 5-fingered grip, scored the walls at varying heights. At the corridor's midpoint, a containment door had been torn from its hinges and placed, not thrown, against the opposite wall, with a deliberateness that suggested purpose rather than violence.
These are Category 3 specimens, Kelly said, stepping carefully over shards of containment glass. Hybrids. The things that weren't stable enough to be weaponized. Too aggressive, too unpredictable. They had 18 of them in various developmental stages.
Had? Briggs asked.
Had.
Who cares? Rourke growled. Eyes forward. The sooner we get what we need, the sooner we get off this freak show island.
They reached the end of the corridor. A wide metal door groaned as Rourke forced it open, the hinges screaming like something dying. Beyond it stretched a wider laboratory hallway bathed in flickering red emergency lights. Cracked glass pods lined both sides of the corridor tall, coffin-shaped chambers, each one shattered. Steam hissed from pipes overhead, weaving ghostly tendrils of vapor around them.
Jesus, Briggs whispered. Every pod is broken. Every single one.
Something scratched in the wall. Not loudly, a soft, rhythmic sound, like an animal in a burrow, coming from inside the wall itself. They stopped. The scratching stopped. A sudden metallic clatter echoed down the hall. One of the empty pods tipped and crashed to the floor, then began again, from a different location, from above. Rourke had his rifle up and pointed at the ceiling before Briggs had fully processed the shift in the sound's location.
Contact! Up on the ceiling!
It dropped into view from a vent in the ceiling tiles, not falling, but releasing, the controlled descent of an animal that has been doing this for long enough to have refined the motion into something nearly graceful. Deinonychus. What had been Deinonychus before the laboratory. A grotesquely mutated Deinonychus. Normally, a Deinonychus stands about human height at the hip, built like a wiry, intelligent raptor with sleek feathers along its arms, a long counterbalancing tail, and sickle-shaped claws built for precision strikes. But this one was wrong. Its limbs were longer than natural, stretched and distorted. Its sickle claws extended into wicked, scythe-shaped crescents nearly twice normal size. Its skin, where feathers should have been, was mottled with sickly black and green patches. And where its tongue should have been, two glistening, forked tendrils lashed outward. It hissed, a wet, bubbling sound. "Fall back!" Kelly screamed. "Paralytic enzyme in the tongue! Don't let it touch you!" Rourke and Briggs opened fire simultaneously. The creature moved sideways on the wall at speeds that made aiming an act of faith rather than skill. Bullets punched through the wall where it had been, cracked a junction box, sparked from a structural beam. Then Rourke tracked and fired and connected twice, and the creature fell from the wall with a sound like a large bag of wet sand. A blur of motion. Briggs staggered. He had gone still, in the way that people go still when they have been touched by something, and are still in the process of understanding what it means. His hand was at his neck. His eyes had the quality of eyes that are observing something happening to a body they are connected to.
My neck,
he said.
It licked me.
His face suddenly wrong. Not pain. The specific, spreading wrongness of paralysis.
I can't.
The creature's forked tongue had struck like a whip, slashing across the exposed skin under his ear. Within seconds, Briggs's legs buckled. His arms hung limp at his sides. A second Deinonychus came through the far doorway at a run. It hit Briggs with its full body weight, which was substantial, and both of them went through the doorway together. Briggs couldn't resist, couldn't move voluntarily at all now, the paralytic enzyme having reached the motor cortex with the speed of something specifically designed to do exactly this. He could hear. He could feel. He could not stop any of it.
Rourke charged after them. Kelly caught his arm. There could be more. We have to move. We have to reach comms or none of this. Her voice was doing the specific thing that voices do when they are managing grief and terror simultaneously, and doing it successfully. The words were correct. The tone was correct. Only something in her eyes was not. Damn it, Rourke said. It was the quietest word he had spoken on this island. He didn't deserve that. None of us do, Kelly said. His final gurgle echoed down the hall. You said Biosyn would send a second team if the pilot did not check in, Rourke added, breathing hard. Kelly met his eyes. They might, but to Biosyn, we are expendable. I need to make sure we have our own way off this island. They moved toward the elevator. The steel doors were streaked with blood, long drag marks leading inside. Rourke hit the blood-stained down button. The elevator groaned, then opened. They stepped inside. As the doors slid shut, they heard it, somewhere above them. A deep, metallic groan,
followed by a slow, deliberate thump. Something massive was moving through the upper levels.
Chapter 11. The elevator doors slid open with a reluctant hiss, revealing a dim corridor bathed in the low buzz of failing lights. Their footsteps echoed along cracked tiles, the air tinged with the faint hum of machinery still clinging to life. Broken monitors flickered weakly on the walls, casting intermittent shadows. Emergency lighting painted the room in alternating stripes of red and shadow. Kelly looked like she had been carved from exhaustion and held together by sheer willpower. Dried blood streaked her temple, smeared from a cut hidden beneath dirt and jungle grime. Her once neat ponytail hung loose, plastered to her neck with sweat and rain. Mud stained her cargo pants up to the knees, and her sleeves were torn from close calls with claws, branches, and teeth. Yet her eyes, sharp, intelligent, unflinching, burned with a survivor's fire. She moved with the careful precision of someone who had used up her fear hours ago and replaced it with focus. Rourke looked worse. His tactical vest was shredded along one side, a violent reminder of the Skyfang's talons that nearly gutted him. A deep bruise bloomed across his jaw, purple and black like spilled ink. Blood soaked into his right sleeve, where a gash hastily stitched in the field had reopened. Dirt mixed with sweat traced harsh lines down his face, and his hair was matted from rain, smoke, and the jungle's relentless humidity. But his posture remained rigid, disciplined, every muscle braced as though daring the island to come at him again. His eyes were cold, alert, always scanning for the next threat. They reached the comms room, and Commander Rourke immediately stepped in front of Kelly, positioning himself between her and the shadows ahead as he swept the room for any remaining threats. "Comms room is clear," Rourke murmured, sweeping his rifle across the corners. "Let's make this fast." Kelly crossed the room to the communications console, while Rourke cleared the space with the professional thoroughness of a man who has learned that the space you're most confident in is the space most likely to surprise you. The console was functional. She had the uplink established in less than a minute. "Uplink established," an automated voice crackled. "This is Dr. Kelly Malcolm, ID 117 Kilo Mike," she said into the mic. "Multiple casualties, including the pilot. 2 survivors remain. Over." Kelly repeated the information 6 times before a response came. A calm, filtered voice replied, "We copy, Dr. Malcolm. Recovery team is en route. ETA 60 minutes. Over." Kelly exhaled, tension loosening just a fraction. "Understood. Over." The voice sharpened. "Dr. Malcolm." The voice shifted. A fraction of something harder underneath professionalism. "Be advised, you will not be included in the extraction unless the research data is recovered. That is non-negotiable. Over." Her jaw clenched. "Copy that. Over." Over and out. Rourke met her eyes. 60 minutes is not much time. "We'll make it work." They exited into the corridor, boots crunching over glass shards slick with blood, each step producing a brittle, skin-crawling crack. Then, "Hold," Rourke ordered, lifting his arm to shield Kelly as a barrier. A dark smear of blood dragged ahead in a broken, zigzagging trail, thick in some places and thinned to watery streaks in others, as if whoever left it had crawled, stopped, then clawed forward again. Congealed clots dotted the path like dropped organs. The trail ended at the server access door, where a wet, dark red handprint had been smeared downward across the panel, fingers gouged deep enough to leave nail marks, streaking crimson like someone had been dragged away mid-scream. "I will go first," Rourke said, weapon steady. The door hissed open as Rourke leaned his weight into it, pushing the metal slab aside with his shoulder while his assault rifle stayed braced tight against his chest. The muzzle tracked the dark corners in smooth, practiced arcs, ready to fire at the slightest twitch of movement. Kelly shifted back a step, pivoting so her weapon covered the hallway behind them, eyes scanning every shadow for anything that might lunge from the dark. Dim red emergency lights pulsed like a dying heartbeat. Server racks rose in silent rows, their cooling fans humming faintly. Water dripped rhythmically from overhead pipes. Then they froze. At the far end of the room stood a silhouette, motionless, shoulders hunched, facing away. Rourke's voice cut through the quiet. "Identify yourself." The figure inhaled a long, shaky breath. Slow, uneven footsteps echoed as it began to turn. The red lights washed over its face, pale, streaked with blood, eyes wide with terror, and something else lurking beneath. Madness.
Chapter 12. Dim emergency lights flickered over the server room, bathing the space in pulses of crimson. The low hum of machines filled the air, underscored by the slow, rhythmic drip of water somewhere in the shadows. A metallic clatter rang out as the figure before them was startled, hands twitching toward a weapon. But then the rifle slipped from his grasp and clattered to the floor. "Commander." The voice was hoarse, ragged. "Jesus, it's me, Hale." Rourke lowered his weapon slightly as Hale stumbled backward into a chair, his uniform torn, caked with mud, and streaked with blood. Kelly rushed forward. Her breath hitched at the sight of Hale's trembling form, his pupils blown wide, his face smeared with dirt and dried blood, one sleeve torn down to exposed muscle. "Sergeant Hale, you're alive! God, what happened out there?" "They came from every direction," Hale rasped, his voice cracking under the weight of memory. "Quinn and Mason didn't make it. The raptors, Christ, Commander, they weren't just fast. They were blurs, shadows with claws. I saw their eyes first, glowing like molten amber in the dark. Then the grass exploded around us." He shuddered violently, fingers curling, as if still feeling something tearing at him. Quinn got pulled off his feet so fast, his rifle never even fired. Mason turned to cover him, but one of those things landed on his back, ripped through his vest like paper. There was blood everywhere, warm, spraying across my face. I couldn't even see. Hale swallowed hard, voice thinning to a whisper. I dropped a couple-shot one straight through the skull, and it kept coming for another 3 steps before it fell. The others circled. They hunted us, Commander. Hunted us. I just ran for my life. Rourke's expression darkened, the muscles in his jaw tightening until the veins along his neck stood out like cords. The crimson pulses from the emergency lights carved harsh shadows across his face, making him look older, tired, haunted. "We've had casualties as well," he said quietly, but the weight behind the words hit like a hammer. The smell of blood and smoke clung to him, and for a moment his eyes flicked away as if seeing the bodies again. Static hissed from an active monitor on the far wall, the screen flickering with ghostly lines that pulsed in sync with the distant hum of failing generators. Dust motes drifted through the crimson light like falling embers. Hale turned toward it, his breath trembling as if the memory itself squeezed the air from his lungs. "I ran until I got inside," he said, voice softer, raw. "The corridors had blood and bodies everywhere. Lights blown,
walls smeared with blood, claw marks carved through steel. I ran into the elevator after hearing something growl behind me. I found the comms room, but it needed a password, and I didn't know what it was.
He wiped his shaking hand across his mouth, leaving a streak of dried blood on his cheek. Then I came in here and found this. You need to see it. He keyed to console, and the monitor flickered to life. The footage was grainy, the audio crackling. A juvenile T-Rex paced within a sterile containment chamber, its taloned feet scraping against reinforced epoxy flooring. The chamber itself was a blinding, unnatural white, a clinical coffin of glass and steel, every surface illuminated by harsh UV strips embedded in the walls. Frost clung to the reinforced observation windows, and condensation dripped in thin rivulets from the ventilation units overhead. Chains hung slack from ceiling mounts where restraints had once been attached, now bent as if something far stronger had already tested them. The young Rex roared, its breath fogging the glass. Muscles rippled beneath mottled scales, some areas still showing signs of recent sedation, patches of shaved skin, needle punctures, and irritated scars. Its golden eyes burned with confusion and fury, darting across the chamber like a cornered animal searching for anything familiar, anything alive to tear into. A man's voice came over the feed, clinical, detached. Project Omega, entry log 0037, date, classified. Subject, Tyrannosaurus rex, specimen 47 beta. Behavior within expected aggression parameters. Weyland-Yutani's specimen delivery confirmed. Foreign organism secured in cryo-containment is now being prepped for integration. Steam hissed as a containment pod slid open, but this time the camera angle widened, revealing an ovomorph that handlers had placed in the chamber minutes earlier. The leathery egg pulsed with slow, organic contractions, its surface slick with mucus strands that clung like veins under the UV lights. "What the hell is that?" Hale breathed, his voice cracking as primal fear crept into it. His eyes, already wide from trauma, stretched even further, pupils pinpricks of terror, as the egg pulsed on screen like a beating heart trapped in flesh. "Shh," Kelly's whisper was sharp, urgent, almost trembling. Hale and Rourke snapped their heads toward her. She wasn't just watching the console. She was captivated, frozen mid-breath, her face ghost-lit by the flickering monitor. Her pupils were dilated, jaw slack, as if something in the footage reached through the screen and seized her thoughts. A thin sheen of sweat gathered at her hairline as she leaned in, mesmerized, unable or unwilling to look away. The juvenile Rex noticed it immediately. It paused mid-pace, head tilting, nostrils flaring. It let out a low, rumbling growl as it stepped toward the egg, slow at first, then with predatory confidence, as if expecting an easy meal. But the ovomorph reacted. It shuddered. It recoiled, as if recognizing the predator towering over it. The young Rex hesitated, its instincts clashing with curiosity. It leaned in, sniffing the egg's crown, its hot breath condensing on the leathery shell. Thin tendrils of steam curled upward as the creature exhaled. Then, a wet, meaty crack split the air. The top of the ovomorph unfolded like a grotesque flower, fleshy petals peeling back to reveal the writhing, pale thing inside. The juvenile Rex jerked back a step, but fascination overpowered fear. Slowly, almost cautiously, it lowered its snout again, trying to smell the opening. That was the mistake. With lightning speed, something from the egg launched upward, its long skeletal fingers snapping open mid-air. The creature slammed onto the Rex's snout. The dinosaur bucked violently, its muffled roars echoing through the chamber as the creature's tail whipped around its neck and cinched tight, forcing its jaws open. The beast thrashed, smashing against the reinforced glass hard enough to rattle the camera feed. But the parasite held fast, its abdomen pulsing as it secured its grip. Male voice. The alien parasite introduced. Initial host resistance extreme. Parasite has attached to subject's snout. Parasite has inserted a tentacle-like appendage into the subject's mouth. Parasite is completely covering the subject's snout. The subject has collapsed, but vitals are normal. Kelly gasped and backed away a full foot, the color draining from her face as if the air had been sucked out of her lungs. Her hand flew to her mouth, fingers trembling, eyes shimmering with a mixture of horror and awe. "Wow," she whispered, the word barely forming, more breath than voice. Rourke and Hale stared at her, unsettled by the sudden shift in her demeanor. Kelly's pupils were blown wide, reflecting the grotesque images on the monitor, as she inched forward again, slow, hesitant, as if drawn by an invisible hook sinking deeper into her psyche. Each step back toward the screen felt deliberate, almost ritualistic, like she was approaching something sacred and poisonous all at once. The feed jumped forward. The parasite lay lifeless on the floor. The juvenile Rex stirred, dazed, its breaths shallow and ragged. Then its entire frame seized violently, muscles knotting beneath its scaled hide. A brutal convulsion racked its spine. Bones cracked, loud, sharp, splintering like branches under immense pressure. The sound vibrated through the speakers, making even the static recoil.
Male voice. Specimen is in extreme pain, the scientist narrated. Respiratory failure imminent. Flesh split open in jagged, wet lines as veins burst and hide tore, spilling ropes of dark, steaming blood across the pristine floor. Something massive bulged and writhed beneath its ribcage, stretching the skin until it thinned into a translucent film. Scales peeled away. Ribs bent outward as if they were pried apart from within. The creature inside pushed again, harder, its silhouette pressing upward in a grotesque outline that clawed and scraped against the Rex's rupturing sternum. With a wet, explosive rupture, the chest burst open, and a nightmare creature forced its way free, screeching. The footage fast-forwarded through days of chaos, security alerts blaring, corridors awash in blood. The voice returned. The hybrid specimen has grown over these couple of weeks. Specimen classified as Distortus rex, aka DREX. The name means distorted king. Its characteristics are hideous. It has a pair of large, pillar-like limbs, with clawed hands capable of grabbing its prey at the front, and it has a pair of small arms resembling an elongated version of the arms that regular T-Rexes have, located closer to the body between the other limb pairs. Aggression, apex. Intelligence, alarming. Breached 6 containment sectors in under 3 hours, relocated to Isolation Lab 7A. Exposure risk catastrophic. InGen is not prepared for this. The video cut to static. "You knew about this?" Rourke demanded, his voice cracking with a mix of betrayal and rising panic. His hands curled into trembling fists at his sides, knuckles whitening beneath dried blood. "Yes," Kelly admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But her gaze didn't lift from the dead screen. But not to this extent. The words left her like a confession she'd been dreading, each syllable trembling with dread, regret, fear.
The silence after her admission lasted 3 seconds before Rourke broke it. Not to what extent? He stepped toward her, voice low. Start talking. Kelly pulled her eyes from the dead screen. Her hands were not steady.
I knew InGen was pushing further than they should have been. The experiments were getting more extreme, more dangerous. That much I knew. She stopped, swallowed. But that thing in the egg, what it did to that baby Rex. I have never seen anything like that. I had no idea anything like that even existed.
Then what do you know? Rourke said. Weyland-Yutani.
She steadied herself. I know the name. I know they are an extremely wealthy corporation. They are known for funding extreme projects. I couldn't get much beyond that before this mission. They keep their work buried deep.
And InGen let them in, Rourke said.
InGen was desperate. Jurassic Park destroyed them financially. The debt, the lawsuits, the collapse. They needed money to survive, and Weyland-Yutani had more of it than anyone. Whatever Weyland-Yutani brought to this island, InGen saw an opportunity to use it, to build something further than anything they had ever attempted, something no one else on Earth could create. She looked back at the screen. And sell it.
To whom? Hale asked.
Anyone willing to pay, Kelly said quietly.
The monitor powered down, its last flicker dying like a candle snuffed out. The room fell into a suffocating silence, thick, heavy, alive. The crimson pulses from the emergency lights washed over their faces, turning every expression into something haunted. The machines hummed on, but even that seemed distant now, swallowed by the enormity of what they'd witnessed. I want to be nowhere near that thing, Rourke said. Dr. Malcolm, get the data. Kelly crossed the room, glass crunching under her boots like brittle bones. The broken shards scattered beneath her steps, glinting in the crimson emergency light as if sprinkled with blood. The console beeped as she initiated the download, sharp, rapid chirps echoing against the metal walls, sounding far too loud in the suffocating quiet. Layers of data flashed across the screen, distorted faces, lab logs, fragments of security feeds drenched in red and static. The glow washed over Kelly's face, sharpening her features, hollowing her eyes, casting her expression somewhere between determination and dread. I've got all the files and wiped the servers, Kelly announced, though her voice trembled just slightly, betraying the adrenaline still burning through her veins. Good, Rourke said. His voice was low, gravelly, the tone of a man who had seen far too much in far too little time. Now let's get topside and out of this nightmare. He scanned the room one last time, jaw clenched, as if expecting something monstrous to peel itself from the shadows. Weapons were checked, safeties clicked off, each metallic snap echoing down the corridor like punctuation marks to a death sentence. Hale tightened his grip on his rifle, still shaking. Rourke's gaze narrowed, steady despite the horror lingering behind it. Kelly exhaled once, slow and deliberate, before stepping forward. Together, the three survivors moved into the dim corridor. The lights flickered like dying stars overhead, casting long, twitching shadows that crawled along the walls. The hum of the server room faded behind them, replaced by the distant groaning of the failing facility, the distant, rhythmic thuds that might have been machinery or footsteps.
Chapter 13. Boots crunched over scattered debris as they left the server room, the faint hum of machinery fading behind them. The corridor seemed to breathe, exhaling warm, metallic-scented air from ruptured vents, inhaling their fear with every step. From somewhere above came a slow, rhythmic thump, heavy, deliberate,
something massive moving overhead, matching their pace. "So, Kelly." Hale's tone tried for casual, but the strain beneath it was unmistakable, thin, tight, like a wire stretched to breaking. "Is your old man proud of you? Running around on islands that want to eat you alive?" "We don't talk," Kelly said curtly, not slowing, not looking at him. "Huh. Is that because you work for Biosyn Genetics?" Hale prodded, voice dripping with forced curiosity. "After Nublar, I figured you'd run the other way from any dinosaur-making company." "I work for Biosyn for the adventure. Duh," Kelly said sarcastically, wiping sweat and grime from her cheek. Rourke gave a short, tired chuckle under his breath, more air than humor. "Anyone waiting for you back home?" Hale pressed. Kelly shot him a glance. "Why?" "Just curious," he muttered. They neared the elevator. Its metal doors were dented inward, deep claw grooves gouged across the surface. The ding as they slid open felt mocking, too normal for the nightmare swirling beyond. They stepped inside. The air was thick, humid, tasting of copper and burnt plastic. The low hum of the ascent vibrated through their boots, filling the tense silence with a mechanical heartbeat. Hale leaned in slightly, eyes narrowed. "What exactly do you do with that data, Kelly?" "This isn't the time, Hale," Kelly snapped, sharp as a whip. The elevator shuddered to a stop. The doors slid open to the surface level, and the world outside looked like hell had clawed its way up. Night air rushed in, hot and choking, carrying the acrid tang of smoke from the burning ruins. Firelight flickered across the jagged skeleton of the lab, twisted beams rising like broken ribs. Embers drifted through the air, glowing softly before burning out. In the distance, a thunderous, guttural roar rolled through the jungle, so deep the ground trembled. Heavy footsteps sounded and felt as if they were closing in on them. "End the interview, Hale," Rourke said dryly, scanning the darkness. They moved toward the perimeter, boots crunching over shattered glass and splintered bones, each step sounding unnervingly loud in the dead, suffocating silence. The shattered debris glittered like scattered teeth beneath the moonlight, and the air carried the coppery tang of blood and smoke drifting from the burning lab. Hale led the group, shoulders tense, rifle angled low but ready. His silhouette twitched, an instinctive, uneasy animal motion, as if some part of him felt the danger closing in. He suddenly stopped, spine stiffening so sharply it looked painful, and turned to face Kelly with slow, deliberate precision, as if every movement was being measured, calculated, weighed. His face, lit by ragged tongues of firelight, was unreadable at first, but there was something simmering behind his eyes, something cold, something that didn't belong to the man they had just pulled from hell. Kelly froze mid-step. A prickling sensation crawled up her spine, the same instinctive unease she felt the moment she first met him, an unspoken wrongness she couldn't name back then, but now hit her like a shockwave. Rourke halted beside her. His eyes shifted from Hale to Kelly, then back to Hale, reading the tension crackling between them. His grip tightened on his weapon, knuckles whitening. Breath held as the air thickened around them like a storm ready to break. What the survivors didn't realize was that the heavy footsteps in the distance, the ones that had been pacing them, stalking them, had stopped too. The jungle held its breath. Even the wind died, leaving only the hollow echo of their last footstep hanging in the air like a warning. The crickets had gone silent. That data, Hale said, his voice hardening to steel. Who gets it when you're done? Kelly ignored him and started to walk past him, shoulders tight, boots sinking into the soft, blood-damp earth. Her heart thudded in her throat. She didn't want to answer him. She didn't want to look at him. Something about Hale felt distorted, like a sickness simmering beneath the surface, gnawing at him in ways no wound ever could. Then, click. Kelly and Rourke stopped in their tracks. Hale raised his rifle at Kelly. The barrel trembled, not from fear, but from barely contained rage.
"Lower the weapon, Hale," Rourke snapped, stepping forward, placing himself between them. "I was sent to make sure the data comes home," Hale said coldly, eyes burning with something twisted. Fear, loyalty, desperation, obsession. "But you've been holding back, maybe selling it to others." His breathing grew sharp, frantic. "You need to hand it to me, now."
Kelly's instincts snapped awake with brutal clarity. They were being stalked. She felt it in her bones, the same suffocating tension she'd known in the worst moments of her life. She forced herself to ignore the immediate threat right in front of her, focusing instead on the predator lurking just beyond sight. "Shh, listen," Kelly hissed, lifting a trembling hand, eyes slicing through the dark as she searched for the unseen thing closing in. Rourke paused, breath caught in his chest. "I don't hear anything," he murmured. "Exactly," Kelly whispered. "Every time we stop, whatever's been following us stops too." Her skin prickled. The jungle's silence felt suffocating, intentional. Then, a low, predatory growl unfurled from the tree line. Not just sound pressure, a vibration that crawled up their bones and settled in their marrow. The growl stretched deep and guttural, like something impossibly large clearing its throat. A branch snapped. Leaves shivered. Something exhaled heavily, wet, bestial. The stench of rot and heat washed over them. "Give me the drive," Hale ordered, voice cracking as he ignored the warning, rifle aimed square at Kelly's heart. "Damn it, Hale! We don't have time for this shit!" Rourke barked, stepping forward another inch. "Days before this mission, Biosyn had me shadow you," Hale said, voice trembling with anger and conviction. "They wanted to know who you were giving their data to. Then this site went to hell, and I was put on this op to get answers." His jaw clenched, eyes glassy with obsession. "So, you're going to hand over the drive and tell me who else you've been selling to?" "You're wasting your time," Kelly said flatly, though her fingers twitched near her belt, prepared, calculating. "No, I'm not." Hale's voice dropped to a near whisper. "I won't ask nicely again." The roar came again, closer, so close the ground trembled under their boots. The trees shook violently, foliage raining down like green ash. "Hale, you better lower your The gunshot cracked like lightning. Rourke jerked, eyes wide, mouth opening in shock, then collapsed as blood erupted across his chest in a sizzling, steaming bloom. The spray hit Kelly's face, hot and metallic, blinding her for a split second. "No!" Kelly screamed, the sound tearing raw from her throat. Hale's expression flickered. Regret? Triumph? Panic? But Kelly didn't wait to find out. She spun and bolted into the jungle. Branches whipped at her arms, slicing shallow cuts into her skin. Vines tangled around her boots, mud sucking at her steps. Every breath tasted like smoke and iron. The canopy swallowed her instantly, plunging her into suffocating darkness. Behind her, the roar followed, deeper now, clearer, hungry. Trees snapped like matchsticks. Something massive crashed through the undergrowth, shaking the earth with every lunging step. It was catching up.
Chapter 14. She burst through a dense curtain of hanging vines, the leaves smacking her face as she stumbled into an open clearing. A forgotten village rotting beneath the strangling grip of the jungle. Moonlight dripped across collapsing wooden shacks, their tin roofs oxidized into jagged, rust-eaten bones. The wind moaned through broken windows, making the structures creak like they resented being disturbed. Kelly ducked into the shadow of a leaning hut, pressing her back to splintered wood. The wall shuddered under her weight. Her breath hitched. Her pulse hammered so violently she swore it moved the air around her. Footsteps crunched outside. Hale. "Come out, Kelly," he crooned, voice slick as oil. "We can still make a deal." Then the ground trembled. A deep rumble slithered through the earth, climbing her legs, rattling her bones. It built, swelling into an eruption of sound so savage it felt like the heavens were splitting open. The tree line shook. Emerging from the darkness was the T-Rex family they'd glimpsed before. The earth shook violently beneath their weight as two colossal adults burst into the clearing, their monstrous silhouettes swallowing the moonlight. The first, the massive female, or a jagged, crescent-shaped scar across her muzzle, the flesh healed in raised, uneven ridges that forced her into a perpetual snarl. Patches of faded, cracked scales lined her flank, ghosts of a long-ago battle. Beside her surged the darker male, his hide mottled with soot, black scales like smoldering embers. One eye was clouded milky white, the lid sagging over an ancient injury. 3 brutal claw marks scored diagonally across his chest, carved so deep they gleamed pale against his dark hide. His thunderous walk carried a slight limp, but none of it slowed his fury. Between them stumbled their wide-eyed juvenile, chirping frantically, its tiny claws scraping at the dirt as it tried to keep pace. Hale whirled, raising his rifle in blind panic. Muzzle flashes carved violent slices of white across his sweat-slicked face, illuminating raw terror in flickering bursts. But the nearest adult was already upon him. It slammed its massive skull into him like a battering ram. Hale's body launched backward, smashing through the rotten wall of a shack. Wood and metal screamed, collapsing inward as dust and debris rained down over his crumpled form. His rifle skittered across the dirt, spinning to a stop. The Rex let out a deafening roar. Hale staggered upright moments later, barely. Blood streamed down his face in thick, sticky rivulets. His hair clung to his forehead in gore-soaked tangles. His eyes burned with feral, frantic desperation. The Rex was about to attack again, but the jungle erupted. Vines snapped like whipcords. Trees bent and splintered. The air itself vibrated. The D-Rex burst into the clearing. The moonlight hit it first, catching the rough, uneven texture of its hide, deep browns and greens that looked almost black in the dark. It was enormous, built heavier and taller than any Tyrannosaurus had a right to be. The scales were coarse and layered, running thick along its back and sides, and where the moonlight caught the edges of them, they glistened like something wet. Its head was wide and deep, the jaw massive, lined with teeth that were not clean or uniform, but jagged and overlapping, some cracked down to the root, dark staining running between them. Then there were the arms. The first pair were long and heavy, built thick with muscle, knuckling into the ground as it moved. The claws at the end curved and dense, each one carving short furrows into the wet earth with every step. Set further back along its body, a second pair of arms sat closer to its sides, shorter, shaped closer to what a standard rex carried. The muscle across its chest and shoulders was knotted and enormous, making its upper body hunch forward. Its hind legs drove it forward in heavy, ground-shaking strides, each footfall sinking deep and sending tremors through the soil. The moonlight did not reach far enough to show everything, but the eyes needed no light. They glowed steady and molten. It saw the juvenile. It struck. In a single blur of claws and sinew, it snatched the hatchling off the ground, hoisting it effortlessly. The terrified baby shrieked. The D-Rex forced it into its jaws. A vicious snap rippled through the clearing. Bones cracked like volleys of gunfire, sharp, brutal pops as vertebrae shattered. Flesh split into wet, stringy ribbons. Blood erupted in hot, steaming arcs that misted the air in a metallic fog. The juvenile's shrieks morphed into choking gurgles as the hybrid shook it violently, tearing its small body clean in half. The creature devoured the pieces in savage, jerking gulps, its throat bulging grotesquely.
The parent Rexes roared, grief, rage, and primal fury merging into a sound that shook the village to its foundations. They lunged. The collision was apocalyptic. The female Rex clamped her scarred jaws around the D-Rex's shoulder, ripping free a steaming slab of flesh. The earth hissed. The chunk sizzled violently where it landed, bubbling as it dissolved into the soil. Droplets of acidic blood sprayed like molten shrapnel. The female Rex shrieked as droplets burned through her muzzle, sizzling holes through scale and tissue. Smoke curled from the wounds. The male Rex charged in a blind fury. The D-Rex whipped its tail like a battering ram, slamming him through a hut. He crashed into a storm of splinters. The male Rex rose, hurt but unbroken, until a stray droplet of acid blood landed on his flank. He roared in agony as it hissed through his hide, burning a smoking crater into muscle. Enraged, he lunged again, jaws locking around the hybrid's throat. The D-Rex thrashed, talons carving deep, wet trenches down male Rex's side, each slash spraying more corrosive blood. Where the acid landed, grass shriveled, soil frothed, and wood dissolved. The air reeked of hot blood, scorched earth, ruptured organs, and eye-watering acid fumes. Above the carnage, a new sound sliced through the night. The rhythmic thump of helicopter blades, echoing like salvation. Kelly didn't think. She ran. She sprinted through the debris, dodging broken beams and shattered rooftops, her eyes locked on the faint, blessed silhouette of the helipad ahead. Behind her, through the chaos of battling beasts, Hale spotted her. He limped after her, face twisted in hate, dodging massive legs, snapping jaws, and acid-burned earth. He snatched up his rifle, blood dripping from his chin. "Oh, no, you don't," he snarled, breath ragged with fury. "You're not getting away from me." The night burned with chaos. The earth shook under the fury of beasts, and Kelly ran for her life. Chapter 15. The roars from the village still thundered behind Kelly.
but the rhythmic chop of helicopter blades pulled her forward like a hand outstretched from heaven. She burst into the helipad clearing, only for something to slam into her back with bone-jarring force. Kelly hit the dirt face first, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. Rocks tore at her skin. A weight crushed her into the ground. Hail. He drove his knee into her ribs, hard. White-hot pain exploded across her side. She gasped, trying to suck in air that refused to come. Hale seized a fistful of her hair and yanked her upward. Then Kelly twisted, slamming her elbow into his gut. They tumbled across the ground in a violent tangle of limbs and fury. "The drive, Kelly!" Hale snarled, spittle flying in long, gleaming strands that snapped between his teeth. "Give it to me, now!" "Go to hell," she hissed, blood streaking her tongue, fire burning behind her eyes, despite the bruises forming along her jaw. Hale's expression twisted even further. No longer a man, but a tightening coil of betrayal, desperation, and something darker. "You've been feeding someone else this data, haven't you?" His voice pitched upward, fraying at the edges. "Not biosyn genetics. Who is it? Who are you selling to?" "You don't know a damn thing about me," she shot back, each word a blade. "I know enough," he whispered, but the whisper carried venom. They fought. Fists cracked against flesh again and again. Kelly's knuckles split open against the ridge of Hale's jaw. Blood sprang from both of them in violent streaks. Hale's punch smashed into her cheekbone, snapping her head sideways so hard her vision exploded into white sparks. She tasted copper and dirt. He ripped the rifle upward, metal scraping, breath heaving, but a shadow staggered out of the tree line. Commander Rourke, or what remained of him, pale as moon-washed stone, bleeding heavily, barely standing, but alive. Rourke threw himself at Hale with every ragged shred of strength left in him. They crashed to the ground in a brutal tangle, Hale's face scraping across the dirt, Rourke's fists slamming into Hale's ribs. "You son of a bitch!" Rourke roared, his teeth grit so hard the muscles in his neck bulged like cables. "You should have stayed down, old man," Hale barked, then jammed his bloody fingers straight into Rourke's open bullet wound. Rourke's scream wasn't human. It ripped through the clearing like torn metal. Hale kicked him away, hard, sending the injured commander rolling across the dirt, smearing blood in a dark arc. Kelly surged forward, sliding to Rourke's side. "I thought you were dead," she breathed, one hand gripping his shoulder. "I would be," Rourke growled through clenched teeth, "but he's a terrible shot." Hale rose, rifle trembling in his hands. "Last chance, Kelly. The drive or you die," he rasped. But before Kelly could speak, the night shuddered. A victory roar, deep, triumphant, monstrous, rolled across the treetops like thunder breaking bone. The D-Rex. Kelly's hand dove into her pocket. Metal kissed her fingertips. She flicked the flare to life and hurled it directly at Hale's feet. Red fire bloomed, staining Hale's face in shifting blood-crimson hues. "Don't move," she whispered to Rourke. Hale smirked. "Really? And you say I have poor aim?"
The jungle interrupted him. The D-Rex erupted from the darkness like a freight train of claws and hatred. Jaws unhinged, saliva flying in long, searing strings. Its jaws stretched wide enough to swallow a man whole. It clamped down on Hale's torso with a crunch so loud the earth itself seemed to flinch. Hale's scream barely began. The beast bit down. Hale split apart, torn cleanly in two, his blood erupting in a boiling red geyser that painted the trees, the dirt, the very air in a hot rain of gore.
What was left of him hit the ground in a sickening thud. The helicopter descended onto the helipad, wind exploding outward in violent gusts. Dirt whirled, leaves tore free. The engine's roar swallowed the night. Kelly swallowed hard. "Come on, we're leaving," she snapped, dragging Rourke toward the helicopter as its side door opened. The co-pilot leapt out to help. They hauled Rourke inside. "Where's Hale?" the co-pilot asked, scanning the shadows. Kelly didn't miss a beat. "He loves it here," and decided to extend his stay. As Kelly was climbing into the helicopter, the co-pilot pulled her back and raised a pistol to her head. "The drive. Now." Kelly froze. "You'll get it when we land," she said, voice steady despite the fire in her veins. The man cocked the pistol. "You'll give it now, or you're staying here. Maybe Hale needs some company." Rourke groaned. "Kelly, just give it to him." Kelly's jaw tightened. Under Rourke's pleading gaze, her resolve cracked. She tossed him the drive. The co-pilot snatched it mid-air, gun lowering. "I got it. Let's go," he shouted to the pilot. The helicopter lifted, air buffeting them as the clearing shrank below. The D-Rex charged, snapping at the skids, claws carving trenches in the dirt as it leapt. Kelly grabbed the flare gun and fired. The flare slammed into the D-Rex's face, exploding in a shower of sparks. The hybrid staggered, roaring in blinding fury as the burning flare clung to its hide. Its scream chased them into the night as the helicopter rose higher, carrying Kelly and Rourke away from the hell they barely survived. But even as the aircraft climbed, the nightmare below refused to fade. The D-Rex thrashed in the clearing, its elongated arms carving trenches into the earth, acid blood sizzling through dirt and roots. The burning flare embedded in its cheek seeped molten light through the cracks of its scarred scales, each pulse illuminating the twisted horror of its hybrid anatomy. Its roars weren't just angry. They were wounded, vengeful, and a declaration that this wasn't over. Kelly, panting and shaking, pressed her forehead to the cold metal interior of the helicopter and watched the monster shrink below them. The rotor whipped the flames around the village into frenzied spirals. The bodies of the Rexes lay motionless amid the ruins, giants fallen in a war they never asked for. Rourke slumped beside her, one arm clamped over his bleeding chest, his breaths sharp and uneven. "That thing," he rasped, staring down at the chaos. "It'll kill everything on this island." Kelly didn't answer, not with words. Her eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening with the quiet, sharpened fury of someone who had seen too much and survived anyway. The co-pilot, clutching the stolen drive, glanced nervously over his shoulder. "Hope whatever's on this thing was worth it," he muttered. Kelly's voice cut through the thrum of the rotors, low, deadly, unwavering. "Oh, it was." Chapter 16. The warm morning sun filtered through the awning of a quiet cafe in San Francisco. Light shimmered on rain-washed pavement, giving the street a soft, polished glow. Conversation drifted around the outdoor tables, blending with the clink of cutlery and the low hum of passing traffic. The world felt peaceful, almost unaware of the nightmare that had unfolded 2 days prior. Kelly sat across from Commander Rourke, his arm in a sling, both holding steaming cups of coffee. They did not speak at first. Their silence was comfortable, shaped by shared survival. Yet the memory of Isla Veritas lingered between them like a shadow neither of them could fully shake away. Rourke was dressed in civilian clothes, but nothing about him read civilian. The bruising was visible above his collar, spreading up the left side of his neck from the impact. Hale shot him at close range. The body armor had slowed the round, but it had not stopped it. The bullet had caught him just below the left side of his chest, and 2 days later the wound was still being managed, the bandaging thick beneath his shirt. 3 ribs had been cracked by the initial impact before the round punched through, and the combination of the bullet wound and the fractured ribs made every breath something he had to think about. He moved nothing he did not have to move. He held himself in the single position that kept everything at a level he could function through, and he did not leave it. Kelly had bruising along her left cheekbone that had deepened overnight, the swelling pressing against the outer edge of her eye. A cut above her brow had been closed with 3 stitches, the thread still dark against the irritated skin around it. Her bottom lip carried a split that had scabbed over and pulled when she spoke. The bruising across her ribs, from where Hale had driven his elbow into her during the struggle, made sitting straight uncomfortable, but she sat straight anyway. Her knuckles on her right hand were scraped and bruised, still raw from the fight. She had only slept for 3 hours in the past 2 days. It did not show in the way she carried herself, but it showed in her eyes. Neither of them had spoken since the coffee arrived. Rourke broke it first. "Hale knew," he said. "Yes, he did. I believe he knew before we ever left the ground," Kelly said. Rourke set his cup down carefully, the motion slow and deliberate. "I keep going back through everything he did on that island, the way he moved through that facility. He was not lost in there. He knew exactly where the server room was. He knew the layout."
He clearly had a separate objective the entire time, Kelly said. Our mission got in the way of his. So, he managed it. Kept us moving toward the data so he could see what we found, then kill everyone and leave the island with it. "Quinn and Mason?" Rourke asked. Kelly looked at him. "He let them walk into those raptors. We had been through enough of that terrain for him to know what would be in it." The muscles along Rourke's jaw tightened. He breathed carefully against the pain in his ribs. "Someone placed him on my team, or someone got to him after the roster was finalized. Either way, there was a hand behind it." "Could be anybody," Kelly said. "They needed someone inside the mission, someone who could monitor what we found and make sure no one who saw too much made it home." She paused. "The D-Rex is still on that island," Rourke said. "Yep," Kelly said. "InGen lost control of it. The facility is gone. No one is monitoring it right now." He looked at Kelly directly in her eyes. "When Biosyn finds out what InGen built down there, what happens next?" Kelly was quiet for a moment. "Biosyn has the money, the reach, and the ambition to go after it. If they get to that island before anyone else, they will not destroy it. They will want to study it, replicate it, figure out how Weyland-Yutani and InGen created it, and how to do it better." She paused, turning her cup slowly on the table. "And I do not think they would go at it alone. Biosyn would reach out to Weyland-Yutani. Why start from scratch when the people who already cracked it are right there? The two of them working together, with that creature as the centerpiece." She shook her head slightly. "That is a problem that does not stay on an island for long." She looked at him directly. "And Weyland-Yutani concerns me beyond just this. What we saw in that lab, what they delivered to that island, that did not come from nowhere. A corporation does not show up with something like that egg and that parasite unless they have been working with it for a long time, in ways and in places that nobody has been allowed to see. Whatever Weyland-Yutani actually is, what is visible on the surface is not the whole picture. Not even close.
A bus moved through the intersection at the end of the block and disappeared. Kelly sipped her coffee. "So, Commander." He lifted his hand, stopping her. "No need for titles here. My name is Tyler." Kelly softened, smiling for the first time that morning. "Okay, Tyler. What have you been doing since Veritas?" Rourke leaned back, posture loosening for the first time since she had known him. The hardened edge in his face eased. "Laying low, sinking, wondering if I still have it in me to keep working for people who treat me like an expendable asset." Kelly leaned forward, her voice firm. "Then stop working for them. Work for people who do value you. Your skills would be used for good instead of greed. I think you should meet a friend of mine." She slid a thick envelope across the table. Rourke stared at it, an unreadable expression. "What is in the envelope?" Kelly's smile shifted, just enough to show purpose behind it. "Something to keep a good man's dream alive." Kelly stood, placing a few bills beneath her coffee cup. "I have to go, but I will see you around, Tyler." As she walked off down the sidewalk, her silhouette disappeared into the crowd. A moment later, a slender man in his early 40s approached Rourke's table. "Good morning," the man said. Rourke straightened. "And you are?" "Tim Murphy, a good friend of Kelly Malcolm." They shook hands firmly. Rourke nodded toward the envelope. "I am guessing this is for you." Rourke handed Tim the envelope, and he slipped it into his jacket without looking inside. "My sister Lex and I run a corporation dedicated to ensuring no one ever twists my grandfather's vision again. You may have heard of him, John Hammond." Rourke's brow lifted slightly. "I have." Tim smiled faintly. "Good, because we are making sure his dream never becomes a nightmare again. Let's talk." Rourke rose from the table and followed Tim across the busy cafe. A sleek black SUV waited at the curb. The door opened with a soft click. The two men climbed inside. The SUV pulled into traffic and disappeared down the bustling San Francisco street.
Chapter 17. At Biosyn Genetics headquarters, a young assistant rushed into Louis Dodgson's private research lab, carrying a secure black titanium case. The overhead fluorescence cast a harsh glare on the polished floors, reflecting the assistant's nervous expression. "Sir, we have received InGen's data drive from our contact," the assistant announced breathlessly. Dodgson barely looked up from his workstation. His irritation was immediate and visible. He snatched the case from the assistant's hands with a sharp motion. "Took them long enough. Let's see what Kelly retrieved off the servers." He flipped the case open. Inside, nestled in foam, was a simple flash drive. Its metallic surface gleamed like a promise. Dodgson slid it into his computer's USB port. A slow, eager smile crept across his face as the device initialized. "Finally," he muttered. "InGen's crown jewels." He clicked the main file. A distorted electronic buzz erupted through the speakers. Then a familiar, mocking voice filled the lab. You did not say the magic word." Dodgson stiffened. Neon red text flashed across the screen in looping patterns. The grinning, animated face of Dennis Nedry appeared, wagging his finger back and forth. You did not say the magic word," the voice repeated, glitching with static. Dodgson's smile evaporated. Rage replaced it instantly. His jaw clenched, his nostrils flared. He slammed his fist onto the desk. Instruments rattled. A glass beaker toppled and shattered. "Damn it!" The system continued to taunt him. You did not say the magic word." The assistant took a nervous step backward. Dodson glared at the screen, fury burning in his eyes. The looping message kept playing, Dennis Nedry's animated finger wagging endlessly like a ghost returning to spit in his face. You did not say the magic word.
You have just listened to Jurassic World Abomination, created and written by Sherry Amori